In 1897, an American newspaper printed a sentence I honestly had to read twice. It said the dead pilot recovered from a crashed aircraft was not an inhabitant of this world. That was printed 50 years before Roswell. And it's not the only one. I found old newspapers reporting a flying monster over Indiana, a winged creature supposedly terrorizing an Iowa town, someone breaking into bedrooms at night just to steal people's hair, a hairy thing that sent a man to the hospital, and finally, a Kentucky family that walked into a police station claiming they'd spent hours fighting strange little figures outside their farmhouse. Police actually went back with them. These stories weren't invented last week for the internet. The headlines are still there. The harder question is whether the newspapers understood what they were reporting. Tonight, we're opening 6 of them. Are you ready? Lock your doors. Put your headphones on, pull your blanket tight. Because after tonight, you may never look at an old American newspaper the same way again. This is Marked Terror. The newspaper called it a strange phenomenon. Crawfordsville, Indiana. September 5th, 1891. Before sunrise, 2 men named Marshall McIntyre and Bill Gray were getting ready for work. They hauled ice. Not exactly the kind of job where you'd expect to become part of American monster folklore. Around 2 in the morning, both men noticed something above them, and whatever they thought it was, it scared them. The Crawfordsville Daily Journal published their story that same day under the headline, "A Strange Phenomenon." The newspaper described what the men claimed to see as an enormous pale object moving through the sky, roughly 18 feet long, several feet wide. No obvious head, no recognizable tail, something along the sides that appeared to move like fins. And one bright feature that witnesses interpreted almost like an eye. It didn't move like a normal bird. At least that's what they believed. McIntyre and Gray said the thing circled, moved toward them, pulled away, then came back. They were frightened enough to take shelter. That's already a good newspaper story. Then Monday arrived, and the newspaper had another witness, Reverend G.W. Switzer, a Methodist minister. Switzer said he'd stepped outside during the night and also noticed something unusual above Crawfordsville. His wife reportedly saw it too. Now the town had 4 witnesses tied to the same strange thing, and the paper had another headline. Mr. Switzer saw the spook. Think about how quickly this was happening. Friday night into Saturday morning, somebody sees something strange. Saturday, it's in the newspaper. By Monday, there's another witness. Now everybody in Crawfordsville knows there's supposedly something flying around town. You don't have social media. You don't need it. The newspaper is doing the job, and people start looking up. This is where the Crawfordsville story could have grown forever. A white monster, no head, fins, one enormous eye. A minister saw it, 2 working men saw it. The perfect unsolved American mystery. Except Crawfordsville did something I wish more mysteries did. Somebody actually followed the thing. 2 local men, John Hornbeck and Abe Hernley, reportedly tracked the strange shape around town long enough to get a much better look. And on September 8th, the Daily Journal published another headline. The Spook Explained. Their monster appeared to be birds, a large flock. The explanation usually given is killdeer, clustered together and confused by Crawfordsville's relatively new electric lighting. Seen from below in darkness, hundreds of birds turning together could create a single shifting white shape. Wings moving at different angles become fins. The flock changes direction. The whole object seems to squirm. One bright reflection becomes an eye. And suddenly, your 18-foot monster breaks apart into birds. I like this case for exactly that reason. Because the witnesses probably did see something. The newspaper wasn't necessarily inventing the event. The mistake came in deciding what the shape was before anybody got a good look at it. And once the words, "horrible apparition" get printed, good luck turning it back into a flock of birds. That's one thing old newspapers and the internet have in common. The correction is never as much fun as the monster. Crawfordsville had its answer within days. The next town wasn't that lucky. 12 years later, an Iowa newspaper would describe its own community as being in terror. And this time, people started carrying guns. Van Meter didn't just get one night. Van Meter, Iowa, September 1903. Small town, coal mining nearby. stores along the main streets. Nothing about Van Meter suggested it was about to become one of the strangest entries in Iowa folklore. Then residents started talking about a light, not a lantern, not somebody moving between buildings, something above them. The reports built over several nights. One local businessman reportedly saw a strange light on top of a building. Then it moved. Another witness described an enormous winged creature. Other residents began telling similar stories. The descriptions were bizarre even by monster story standards. Large wings, dark body, fast movement, and most memorably, a brilliant light that seemed to come from the creature's head. Then the newspaper got involved. One surviving headline is wonderfully direct: Winged Monster. Iowa PBS, working from the historical story, notes that a newspaper of the time reported that practically the entire town was in a state of fear. That's not some modern cryptid blogger trying to make Van Meter sound exciting. That's how the event was being sold in 1903. And once people started expecting the creature, the sightings escalated. Men reportedly fired at it. One witness claimed bullets didn't appear to stop it. Others said the thing moved toward the old coal mine outside town. Then came the part that turned a strange sighting into full-blown local legend. According to the story passed down afterward, townsmen followed the creature toward the mine. There, they supposedly encountered not one, but two. One smaller, one larger. They fired. The creatures disappeared into the abandoned mine. The entrance was eventually associated with the idea that whatever people had seen had come from underground. Now, before we turn this into Stranger Things, Iowa, there's a serious problem. The details get less reliable the farther away we move from the original newspaper coverage. Some parts of the modern Van Meter story come through decades of retelling. Names, exact distances, the sequence of events, versions don't always match. That's what folklore does. But the basic fact survives scrutiny. People in and around Van Meter really were talking about a strange winged creature in 1903. Newspapers really reported it. The creature really became part of local history. And more than a century later, Van Meter hasn't let the thing go. So what did residents see? An unusually large bird? Several different animals turned into one creature through newspaper retelling? Owls? A hoax? Fear building on fear? I don't know. But there is one detail that makes this case fascinating to me. Electric light was still changing the American night. Think about that. People who'd grown up with darkness were suddenly living in towns with new artificial light sources. Birds behaved differently around them. Shadows behaved differently. Objects could be illuminated from directions human beings hadn't spent generations getting used to. Crawfordsville may have literally created a monster by shining electric light underneath a flock of birds. Could Van Meter have done something similar? Possible. But whatever started those Iowa reports, the newspaper gave it a body, wings, light, a name, a location. Once that happened, Van Meter didn't just have a strange animal sighting anymore, it had a monster. And then, in 1897, 6 years before Van Meter, a Texas newspaper had already gone much further. Because that paper didn't merely report something strange in the sky. It reported a crash, and according to the article, there was a body. A windmill demolishes it. Aurora, Texas, April 1897. This is the newspaper page I'd put on screen and leave there for a second, because otherwise people are going to think we made this up. The Dallas Morning News published a short report from Aurora, written by S.E. Hayden. The headline, "A windmill demolishes it." Doesn't sound too exciting. Then you read the article. According to Hayden's story, early risers in Aurora saw one of the mysterious airships that had supposedly been appearing around the country. It was moving slowly, too low. Something seemed wrong. The craft passed over town, then hit the tower of Judge J.S. Proctor's windmill. According to the newspaper, it broke apart in an explosion. Debris scattered. The windmill was damaged. So was the water tank. Even the judge's flower garden supposedly got destroyed. And then comes the sentence. The article said enough remained of the pilot to indicate he was not an inhabitant of this world. April 1897. Let that date sit for a second. The Wright brothers wouldn't make their famous powered flight at Kitty Hawk until 1903. The word UFO wouldn't exist for decades. Roswell was 50 years away. And a Texas newspaper is talking about an airship crashing into a windmill, with a pilot supposedly from somewhere other than Earth. The story went further. It claimed strange writing had been found among the wreckage. It mentioned an opinion that the pilot might have been from Mars. And the article said the remains would receive a Christian burial in the Aurora cemetery. That's unbelievable, literally. Because unlike some of the other stories tonight, Aurora has a huge evidence problem. Almost everything depends on that one newspaper report. We don't have a confirmed wrecked aircraft. No verified pieces of exotic metal sitting in a museum. No medical examination of the supposed pilot. No government file from 1897 documenting an extraterrestrial body. No photograph of the wreck. And the city of Aurora itself treats the story today as local lore. That's important. The newspaper article is real. That doesn't mean the crash was. And there's another reason to be suspicious. The late 1890s were full of mystery airship stories. Some were clearly jokes. Some were exaggerated. Newspapers competed aggressively for readers. Editors weren't living under 21st century standards of verification. A fantastic story could sell papers. And Aurora wasn't exactly thriving at the time. Later researchers have argued that Hayden may simply have written a tall tale. Honestly, that explanation doesn't bother me. Because even if Aurora was a newspaper hoax, look at the hoax. An American journalist in 1897 imagined machinery failing in the sky. A crash. A strange pilot. Writing nobody could read. A burial. That's basically the skeleton of a 20th century UFO story, printed before airplanes became ordinary. And the story didn't die. People later searched Aurora Cemetery for the supposed grave. Metal detectors were used. Researchers came looking for wreckage. The town became permanently linked to an event that may never have happened. All because of a few paragraphs in a newspaper. That's power. One reporter can give a town a mystery lasting more than 100 years. But our next newspaper story has a very different problem. Nobody doubts somebody was getting into bedrooms. Police knew that. The people waking up with pieces of their hair missing knew it too. The mystery was who the hell was doing it. Pascagoula's Phantom Barber, June 1942. Pascagoula, Mississippi. America was 6 months into World War II. The Gulf Coast was living under wartime pressure. Shipbuilding was booming. Blackout restrictions had changed what nighttime looked like. German U-boats were operating in American waters. People had enough real things to worry about. Then somebody started breaking into bedrooms. Around midnight on June 5th, two young women, Mary Evelyn Briggs and Edna Marie Heidel, were asleep at the Our Lady of Victory's convent. A noise woke them. They saw a man escaping through the window. They hadn't been robbed in the normal sense. Money wasn't the point. Jewelry wasn't the point. Someone had cut locks of their hair. That's it. He entered a room where people were sleeping, cut their hair, and left. Imagine explaining that to police. Then another report came in. A young girl woke to find that her hair had also been cut. A screen had apparently been sliced to gain access. Now Pascagoula had a prowler. Newspapers gave him a name, the Phantom Barber, and once that name appeared, the case exploded. Police Chief A.W. Ezel increased patrols. State police became involved. Residents armed themselves. At one point, wartime blackout concerns collided with the investigation because authorities wanted residents to be able to see what was happening around their homes. A reward was offered. Newspapers outside Mississippi picked up the story. This strange little series of break-ins was suddenly national news, and the barber appeared to become more dangerous. One later incident involved Terrell Heidelberg and his wife being attacked inside their home. Heidelberg was struck with a metal object. Whether that attack was actually committed by the same person who'd been cutting hair was never established beyond doubt. That's worth remembering. When a town becomes terrified of one criminal, every unexplained crime starts getting his name attached to it. Then police arrested a man named William Dolan. Dolan was a chemist, German-born, and remember the year, 1942. That mattered enormously. Suspicion of Germans was everywhere. Dolan had also reportedly had a dispute involving Heidelberg. Police found hair near Dolan's residence. He was charged in connection with the violent attack on Heidelberg. The mysterious haircut incident stopped after his arrest. So, They caught the phantom barber? That's where this gets uncomfortable. Dolan was convicted of attempted murder in the Heidelberg case. But he was never convicted of being the man who had been slipping into bedrooms and cutting hair. Years later, his case was reviewed and his imprisonment shortened, and the identity of the actual phantom barber remained uncertain. That's why I like this one. Not because of some paranormal angle. There isn't one. It's frightening because somebody real seems to have discovered that he could enter homes at night, do something intimate and bizarre, and leave before anybody understood what was happening. Then the newspapers gave him a name. Once that happened, Pascagoula wasn't hunting an intruder anymore. It was hunting the phantom barber. Those words change how a town thinks. Now every noise has a face attached to it. Every open window means something. Every stranger becomes suspicious. And wartime paranoia added fuel. Was Dolan actually the barber? Could some incidents have been copycats? Could several unrelated crimes have been merged together by frightened residents and newspapers? All possible. What isn't in doubt is that police investigated a real series of incidents. Records from the Pinkerton National Detective Agency even preserve material related to Dolan and the Phantom Barber investigation. This wasn't created decades later as campfire folklore. Pascagoula lived through it, and once again, the headline became bigger than the evidence. But in Arkansas, almost 30 years later, the opposite happened. A reporter arrived expecting a small local story. Instead, he helped give an American monster its name. The day the Fouke monster entered the newspaper, May 1971. Fouke, Arkansas. Small town. Low country near the Texas border. Creeks, woods, farm roads. Then Bobby Ford told local authorities that something had attacked him outside his home. Ford described a large, hairy, human-like creature, tall, broad, fast. He said it came close enough to grab him around the shoulder. Ford broke away. He was taken to a hospital. Doctors treated him for minor scratches and shock. Stop there, because this is the moment where modern retellings usually sprint straight toward Bigfoot. I don't want to do that yet. We have a frightened man. We have an alleged animal encounter. We have hospital treatment. That's what we know. Ford's family said they'd already noticed something around the property. His wife Elizabeth reported seeing a hairy arm near a window. Other men with Ford said they'd seen the creature and fired at it. They thought they'd hit something. When authorities searched, they didn't find a dead monster. They didn't find blood proving the men had shot one. But investigators did report unusual tracks around the area and marks at the house. Now, the newspapers arrived. Jim Powell was a young reporter working for the Texarkana Gazette and Texarkana Daily News. He went to the Ford property. What he found wasn't a family enjoying its 15 minutes of fame. Powell later remembered them as frightened and preparing to leave a house they'd owned for less than a week. His first story carried a headline along the lines of, "Hairy Monster Hunted in Fouke Sector." Then came follow-up coverage. One paper asked whether the creature might simply be a mountain lion. Another headline talked about fields being searched for the monster. And somewhere in those reports, the phrase, "Fouke monster," appeared. There. That's the birth. A family reports something. Police come. A reporter writes it down. An editor needs a few words that fit across a column. Fouke monster. And now the creature has a name. The Associated Press and United Press International picked up coverage. The story escaped Arkansas. People started coming to Fouke, searching, looking for tracks, watching the tree line. More sightings were reported. Then filmmaker Charles B. Pierce arrived. In 1972, the legend of Boggy Creek turned Fouke's local mystery into something much larger, and some of the real people connected to the events appeared in the film. That's when the line between event and folklore becomes almost impossible to see. What was the Ford family reacting to before the newspaper arrived? Possibly an animal, possibly a bear. Some people around Fouke considered a large cat. There were rumors involving escaped exotic animals. There were hoax accusations. And there were older local stories about large, hairy creatures that got attached to the 1971 event afterward. Once the movie existed, good luck separating memory from mythology. Now people knew exactly what the Fouke monster was supposed to look like. That's something witnesses in May 1971 didn't have. I find that important. A monster is easiest to study before everybody knows its face. And those first days in Fouke are surprisingly grounded. Ford goes to the hospital. Authorities inspect the property. A newspaper reporter talks to the family. People search the fields. There's disagreement immediately about what the thing might have been. That feels real. Not real monster. Real confusion. There's a big difference. The Encyclopedia of Arkansas describes the legend as basically being born from that local newspaper coverage. One little article, then another, then wire services, then a movie. 50 years later, the Fouke monster is still walking through American folklore. That's how fast a strange night can become permanent once the press gets involved. But we've saved the strongest newspaper for last. Because in 1955, the Kentucky New Era didn't need to invent a dramatic headline. The people involved had already walked into the Hopkinsville police station and told officers a story nobody there could have expected. And when police went out to the farmhouse, they went in force. Police probe alleged raid by little men in spaceship. August 21st, 1955. Sunday night. Christian County, Kentucky. A farmhouse outside the small community of Kelly. Several members of the Sutton family were there, children, adults, visitors. One of those visitors, Billy Ray Taylor, went outside to get water. When he came back, he told the others he'd seen something unusual cross the sky and appear to come down nearby. Nobody seems to have taken him very seriously at first. Then the family dog began reacting. Men went outside, and according to the story they later gave police, something came toward the house. Small, humanoid, long arms, large eyes. The witnesses disagreed on some details, which is normal when several frightened people see something at night. But they agreed enough on one point. They didn't think whatever was outside was human. The men had guns. They fired. They claimed the figures were hit, but kept moving. At one point, something appeared outside a window. Another reportedly approached the door. The family said this went on for hours. Now, I want you to forget aliens for a moment. Forget goblins. Forget every illustration you've seen of Kelly-Hopkinsville. Think about 12 frightened people in a rural house, some of them armed. They're firing into the darkness because they genuinely believe something is approaching the home. Whether they're right or wrong, that situation is dangerous. Eventually, they'd had enough. The group got into vehicles and drove to the Hopkinsville police station. That's the moment that changes this entire case for me. They didn't stay home and turn it into a story. They went looking for law enforcement. According to contemporary reporting, they arrived saying they needed help. Police took the situation seriously enough to respond. And not with one bored deputy. City police, Kentucky State Police, sheriff's deputies, military police from nearby Fort Campbell. More than a dozen officers and military personnel were associated with the response. They went to the Sutton farmhouse late that night. They searched the property. They looked for whatever this terrified group claimed had been surrounding the house. What did they find? No spacecraft, no bodies, no captured creatures, no physical evidence proving visitors from another world had been there. There were signs of gunfire around the house, damage, spent ammunition, but nothing that solved what the family believed it had seen. Officers stayed into the early morning. Eventually, they left. Then the newspaper arrived. On August 22, 1955, the Kentucky New Era ran the story. One version of the headline read, "Story of Spaceship, 12 Little Men Probed Today." Later reproductions carried another beautiful line, "Police probe alleged raid by little men in spaceship." Imagine buying your local newspaper Monday afternoon and seeing that. Not in a comic, not in a science fiction magazine, the local paper. And the story underneath tells you police spent hours at a farmhouse outside town investigating people who said they'd been battling strange visitors. The newspaper didn't declare extraterrestrials real. Actually, local coverage showed plenty of skepticism. People suggested hoaxing, exaggeration, animals. One contemporary rumor involved monkeys supposedly escaping from a passing circus. That explanation didn't fit particularly well either. Years later, one of the strongest skeptical explanations centered on great horned owls. And I'll admit, owls solve more of this story than people want them to. Large reflective eyes, ear tufts that can look like pointed ears, long-looking wings, talons. They perch on roofs and tree limbs. At night, under stress, with poor lighting, an owl can look unbelievably strange. And if there was a meteor seen in the region earlier that evening, that could account for Taylor's original light in the sky without requiring a landed spacecraft. So perhaps the whole thing was a perfect storm. Meteor, owls, fear, gunfire, people influencing one another. Once the first shot is fired, everybody's nervous system is somewhere else. That's plausible. But I wouldn't call it solved, because the behavior of the people that night still interests me. They left their own house. They brought children with them. They drove into Hopkinsville. They went straight to police. Officers who spoke with them generally described them as frightened. Contemporary reports said authorities did not simply dismiss the group as drunk. And after police left, the family reportedly said the strange activity started again. By the following day, neighbors said the house had been abandoned. The story went everywhere. Newspapers across the United States picked it up. Letters eventually reached Hopkinsville from around the world. 2 years later, Police Chief Russell Greenwell was still receiving questions about what had happened outside Kelly. And something fascinating happened as the story traveled. The newspaper version changed. The creatures became little green men. But the earliest witnesses hadn't necessarily described them as green. That part grew in the press. Exactly like so many things we've seen tonight. Event, headline, retelling, image, legend. The newspaper didn't merely preserve Kelly-Hopkinsville, it helped reshape it. Today the image of little green men is inseparable from the story. But go back to August 21, 1955. Before the artwork, before UFO books, before documentaries. And there's a much simpler scene. A family shows up at a police station late at night. They say something is outside their house. They're frightened enough that more than a dozen law enforcement and military personnel eventually become involved. The officers find no monster, no alien, no spaceship, and nobody comes up with an explanation strong enough to stop people arguing about the case for the next 70 years. That's why Kelly-Hopkinsville belongs at the end of this episode. The newspaper isn't the evidence that aliens came to Kentucky. It never was. The newspaper is evidence that this event really entered the life of the town. People called police. Police responded. Journalists wrote it down. And on Monday morning, America got another impossible headline. The headlines were real. 6 newspapers. 6 completely different problems. Crawfordsville printed a flying monster, then printed the explanation a few days later. Van Meter's newspapers helped turn a series of strange sightings into a creature that still belongs to Iowa folklore. Aurora printed an airship crash and a pilot supposedly not from this world, with almost no evidence outside the article itself. Pascagoula gave a real nighttime intruder a name people still remember 80 years later. Fouke showed us almost the exact moment a local report became an American monster. And Kelly-Hopkinsville put one of the strangest stories in American folklore right beside a very real police response. That's why old newspapers are dangerous in the best possible way. You go looking for history, and every once in a while you find something that shouldn't be there. A headline that sounds too modern. A monster you thought somebody invented online. A UFO story from before UFOs were supposed to exist. A town chasing somebody with a name that sounds like a horror movie villain. Then you open the scan, and there it is. Ink on paper. But remember what that proves. It proves the story was printed. Not that every word was true. Old newspapers made mistakes. They exaggerated. They repeated rumors. Some editors printed jokes without making the joke obvious. Witnesses were wrong. Reporters were wrong. Sometimes everybody was wrong at the same time. And occasionally, they recorded something nobody ever completely figured out. That's the part I'm interested in. The gap between what happened and what the headline said happened. Because somewhere inside that gap, American folklore gets born. So I want to try something with the comments tonight. Don't give me the most famous mystery you know. Give me the weirdest old American newspaper story you've ever seen. Something with a real date, a town, a headline. Something we can actually go find in the archive. If it's good enough, I'll open the newspaper myself. Until next time, stay curious. Because sometimes you don't have to search the dark web for a disturbing story. Sometimes, you just need a newspaper from 1897.